Thank you for joining us this afternoon on the public scoping meeting for the St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana Feasibility Study. We will begin our presentation in a few minutes. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Dixon. I am project manager for the United States Army Corps of Engineers in New Orleans. I am lead for this project and point of contact for the public. Today, we'll be talking about the St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana Feasibility Study. We will be hearing from Michelle Myers, our lead plan formulator, as well as Everett Baker, our environmental specialist, during this presentation. Other members of our team are standing by to answer your questions, and they include our engineers and economists. We're about 6 months into a 3-year process. We are actively engaged with our non-federal sponsor, the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, or CPRA, as well as the St. Tammany Parish government, the St. Tammany Levee Drainage and Conservation District, and city officials within St. Tammany Parish. We have received a great deal of information from these entities and appreciate all of their efforts and help getting us to this point. The key to this meeting is to gather input on our alternatives and ideas moving forward for flood risk and coastal storm risk reduction in St. Tammany Parish. The dialogue will help us shape our process and help us make more informed decisions. We are working towards a plan to reduce flood impacts to St. Tammany Parish, and we look forward to your response and your input as our plan is developed. A quick agenda for review. I will be discussing with you the purpose of this meeting, the authority, ongoing coordination, and overall schedule for the study. Then Michelle Myers, our team plan formulator, will walk you through where we are in the process, how we got where we are in the study, and how things will look moving forward. Everard Baker, our environmental specialist on the team, will then discuss how the National Environmental Policy Act is integrated into this study. We're here for 2 reasons today: to let you know what the Corps is planning. These meetings are aimed at updating the public on our progress since you last heard from us, while we are gaining input from the public. This is a federal study that will be informed by all other local work that is being done and has been done in the past. The key to this meeting is to gather input on our alternatives and ideas moving forward for flood risk management within St. Tammany Parish. Like I said, we're about 6 months into a 3-year process, and we would like to hear from you, your experiences from flooding in the area, and your ideas for solution. This dialogue will help us shape our process and help us make more informed decisions. If you are capable, you are welcome to comment on the Facebook live feed. Otherwise, we'll have additional ways to contact us at the end of the presentation. Let's talk briefly about our study authority. When we talk about creating or starting a project, the Corps needs two things from Congress. First, we need the authority. That is essentially permission to start a project or look at a concern. The authority for this project came out of the WIN Act of 2016. It included language for flood risk and coastal storm risk management, as well as ecosystem restoration. The thing that the Corps needs from Congress before we do any work is appropriations or funding. Our funding came from the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. Following the flood event in 2016 and the hurricanes that swept the Gulf Coast, Congress gave us funding for the 2016 authority. A couple of things I do want to note here. The 2016 authority said the Corps is authorized to investigate ecosystem restoration and management, but the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 funding we have limits us to flood risk and coastal storm risk management. We are not going to be able to recommend constructing ecosystem restoration for the purpose of ecosystem restoration. We are going to be looking at natural and nature-based solutions for flood risk and coastal storm risk reduction. For example, we can investigate marsh creation, but the marsh creation would need to produce a tangible benefit that can be related back to flood risk and coastal storm risk management. The marsh would have to reduce damages caused by flood events. This study is fully federally funded. We are held to a 3-year, $3 million budget by Congress. It is part of the planning process called 3x3x3 study. 3 years, $3 million, and 3 levels of vertical integration. While time and costs are self-explanatory, 3 levels of vertical integration may not be. What this means is that when you're calling me at the Corps District building in New Orleans, I am then talking to our division office in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and they are talking to the headquarters office in Washington, D.C. We are in continual conversation with our vertical chain with at least quarterly briefings so that they are engaged at all milestones within the study. We work as a team so that there are no surprises at the end of the study, and it should be a seamless process to get this study through the 3-year process and end up with a final recommendation for construction from Congress. Michelle Myers is now going to discuss the planning process so that you can have a better understanding of where we are in the 3-year process.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Myers, and I'm the plan formulator on the St. Tammany Parish Feasibility Study. The Army Corps of Engineers uses a 6-step planning process, which is a structured approach to problem solving for water resource studies. The steps are illustrated in the figure are: Step 1, identifying problems and opportunities; Step 2, inventory and forecasting conditions; Step 3, formulating alternative plans; Step 4, evaluating alternative plans; Step 5, comparing alternative plans; and Step 6, selecting a plan. Although the process is depicted as a linear set of steps, the process is iterative, and steps are repeated sometimes several times as problems become better understood and as additional information becomes available. New ideas can arise at any time, and the ultimate decision is better due to this process. Today you will get to see where we are in the process and where we are asking you to plug in to help us further define the problems and provide new information or ideas to help refine the planning. As Amy mentioned, we have been collaborating with other ongoing efforts, including CPRA, the St. Tammany Parish government, the Levee Board, and the cities within the parish to ensure we are building upon the great efforts that many have already started and have underway to address flooding in St. Tammany Parish. It is a large parish, and we will all need to continue to work together on this important issue. For our planning process, we were able to compile information from at least 30 different studies that were completed in the parish. This provided us with a lot of data and project ideas that could be used as a starting point for our planning process. The process is now headed towards determining a tentatively selected plan and making recommendations for a project or projects that are needed in the parish to reduce flood damages. We have analyzed the alternatives we found in previous studies and also incorporated ideas from our initial public meetings held earlier this year in February 2020. We are here today seeking input again on the refined list of alternatives, including any new potential alternatives. In the next few slides, we'll walk you through some of the various aspects that are defined during the initial planning phases of the project, and then walk you through some of the alternatives we have looked at and the criteria we use to narrow down those project ideas. After the short presentation, we will stay on Facebook Live to answer questions. Feel free to comment as we go along in this presentation, and we will answer questions at the end. If you cannot comment on today's live video, you will be able to text, email, call, or write into us with your feedback. The contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation. Some specific questions to keep in mind as we go through the alternatives are: do the alternatives meet the needs of the community? Are there additional problems related to flooding in the project area that are not captured or not addressed by the proposed alternatives? Are there measures or alternative strategies that would address the problems more effectively? The study area for our project encompasses all of St. Tammany Parish. The parish is approximately 1,124 square miles and is located in southeastern Louisiana. St. Tammany Parish is located on the northeast shore of Lake Pontchartrain and is home to over 250,000 residents. The documented sources of flooding and flood damages in the study area are from multiple sources, including storm surge, waves, rainfall, and riverine bank overtopping. These flood events have increased the risk to life and safety, increased the risk of flood damages to property and critical infrastructure. There's also been economic losses from these different flood events and increased risk to damage or loss of historic structures within the parish. We know that ecological habitat is also being lost, and that ecological habitat is a type of natural resiliency and protection from some of these flood events. Sea level rise and subsidence are expected to continue, which will increase this flood risk. St. Tammany Parish has also seen an increase in development, which has led to increased flooding. Our objectives in the study area are to address these documented problems, and the study will aim to provide a recommended plan that reduces the risk to public safety, reduces flood damages to structures, and reduces economic losses from flooding. Another aspect of the project objectives are tied to increasing community resiliency, including the ability of a community to prepare for and recover from a flooding event. Part of our process is coming up with a baseline to measure the alternatives against. The no action alternative, or the future without project condition, is this benchmark. This is our projected idea of what conditions would be if no Army Corps of Engineers action were to take place as part of this study. The projected without project condition includes increased flood risk and coastal storm damage associated with high precipitation and tropical storm events, and rapid change in floodplain hydrology from development activities. Continued flooding from the Pearl River, Chifuncta, Bogachita, and other waterways will continue to negatively impact communities within the parish without flood risk reduction measures. We're coordinating with CPRA, the parish government, and stakeholders to document the current and planned construction projects that would reduce flooding in the parish, and this will be included in our analysis. For example, if the parish is in the middle of planning and designing something that we know will be put in place, we'll include that in our analysis. One of the first steps we took was to look at the structure inventory for the entire parish to determine where the population is located and to help better define the areas we need to investigate. There are about 100,000 structures within the study area. 90% of these are residential and about 10% are commercial. We next looked to see which areas of the parish were documented to have flooding. We received information from St. Tammany Parish and also looked at documented flooding impacts from the FEMA flood claims, prior reports, and incorporated the input we received from citizens to date. This included the information we received during the February 2020 public meeting, where meeting attendees used sticky notes to show us on large maps where there were issues with flooding and helped provide alternatives. We were then able to overlay the structures with the areas of flooding to see where we might need to focus our attention during this study. There are areas with coastal flooding issues and areas that have more riverine or inland flooding. Coastal issues are shaded in pink on this map, and green is the riverine flooding. Some areas also have multiple sources of flooding. We're taking all of this into account in the study and ultimately our recommendation. An alternative is a combination of measures that together address the project objective. We initially had a list of about 180 project ideas that we received from the previous reports, CPRA, St. Tammany Parish, the cities, and the input provided during those first round of public meetings. We looked closely and evaluated that list to determine which of those ideas would meet project objectives, which did not violate planning or policy constraints. Some were duplicative or already constructed or already underway, so we were able to remove that. We were able, through that process, to narrow the list down to about 60 measures. These 60 remaining measures were grouped into 13 alternatives by geographic area. The measures included things such as detention ponds, channel improvements, dredging, clearing and snagging, or widening a channel. Alternatives also included diversion channels, pump stations, levees, floodgates, and nature-based flood risk items such as marsh creation, shoreline protection, and breakwaters. The geographic area for these alternatives include Lacombe, Bayou Liberty, Bayou Vincent, Bayou Bonfuga, Slidell, Upper Covington, Covington, Mandeville, Abita, and Bogachita flooding to address flooding in Sun and Bush. For the most part, these areas are separable and combinable, and projects that are implemented in Mandeville, for example, would not have a direct impact on any actions in Slidell. So in the end, our recommended plan could be a combination of many projects from many different parts of the parish. You'll also note that on this list we have a no action alternative, and this alternative will be considered throughout this study alongside any other structural or non-structural plans. This alternative is the alternative where we consider if no action was conducted by the Army Corps of Engineers under the study. Next slide. This slide shows the screening criteria that we use to evaluate these 13 initial alternatives and the measures within those alternatives. These criteria helped us narrow down the concepts that we would investigate further. We looked at each of the alternatives and measures in detail to determine if they met the project objectives, and that was to reduce flood damage to structures, reduce risk to public health and safety, reduce interruption of transportation, increase community resiliency, and increase the resiliency of coastal habitats as natural resources to reduce flood damages. We also looked to make sure that the alternatives and measures met the Army Corps' definition for flood risk management versus local storm drainage. For detention ponds, we looked to make sure the scale was large enough to ensure the detention ponds had an impact beyond just a localized area. We looked to find alternatives and measures to reduce flood risk and repetitive loss in problem flooding areas. We also looked to make sure the estimated damages that we would be avoiding did not exceed the implementation cost of those projects. Additionally, we looked within the state master plan and the St. Tammany master plan for consistency with the things we were recommending with those plans that were already out there. We also looked to make sure that our alternatives avoided our project constraints, which were related to threatened and endangered species, lands known to have hazardous, toxic, and radioactive waste, and impacts to recreational areas and view sheds. The main alternatives and measures screened from that initial array of 13 alternatives include a Lake Pontchartrain surge barrier alternative, a Bayou Chinchuba alternative, diversion channels from the Tchefuncta and Abita to Lake Pontchartrain, levees along the Bogachita, and nature-based features of standalone projects. These alternatives and measures were screened based on items such as effectiveness in reducing flood damages and the estimated implementation cost exceeding the estimated flood reduction benefit. It should be noted that non-structural alternatives are still being considered in these areas where alternatives were screened out. The 13 initial alternatives and some measures within the alternatives were further narrowed down to the 8 shown on the screen through the use of those screening criteria and multiple iterations of the planning process. We're going to present this current list of alternatives to you today for your input and feedback. We're also looking for any new or additional concepts that you do not see in these alternatives. Alternative 2 is our non-structural alternative. The preliminary shading shows areas in the parish with documented flood damages. These areas will be refined after engineering modeling is complete. We'll evaluate things such as floodproofing, structure raising, buyouts, and relocations. This alternative can be standalone or portions can be combined with other structural alternatives. Alternative 4 includes a levee to reduce storm impacts to Lacombe. We've been coordinating with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regarding the alignments and potential impacts to the wildlife refuge. Pump stations and other features of the levee have not yet been designed, but will be included if this alternative continues to move forward. On this map, you'll also see something proposed as a combined levee. This includes the Lacombe levee that we proposed in this alternative combined with a levee that we're proposing to reduce coastal storm impacts to the Bayou Liberty, Bayou Bonfuca area. If both of these levees are move forward in the process, we would consider the combined levee. Both alternatives will also be evaluated separately. Alternative 5 is our Bayou Liberty, Bayou Vincent, Bayou Bonfuca alternative. The purpose of this alternative is to address riverine flooding and includes a detention pond. It also includes channel improvements and a potential levee with gate and pump station. The levee, gate, and pump station are proposed to reduce storm surge impacts. The detention pond and channel improvements are aimed to address riverine flooding. Alternative 6 is our South Slidell storm surge risk reduction alternative. This includes a combination of levees and pump stations to reduce tidal surge from storm events. This includes levees to tie into the already existing levees at Lakeshore, Oak Harbor, and Kings Point. Alignment variations have been coordinated with the CPRA master plan and with information coming out of the current St. Tammany Parish Coastal Protection Study and the Army Corps of Engineers SELA Schneider Canal project. We're also considering a ring levee around Eden Isles in this area. This ring levee would potentially be incorporated into the levee features west of I-10. Alternative 7 addresses the eastern portion of the parish and includes improvements to Poor Boy Canal and a potential diversion at Gump Bayou to move water east and reduce downstream flooding. This also includes channel improvements on Doubloon Bayou and clearing and snagging or dredging, and a levee to prevent flooding from the Pearl River. Alternative 8 includes a proposal for channel modifications or improvements on Mile Branch and Covington. This would reduce the risk from headwater flooding in the upper reaches of the Tchefuncte and Bogaflaya rivers. Potential actions here include enlarging the lower 2 miles of Mile Branch and enlargement of Lateral A or Simpsons Creek. In Mandeville, we're looking at a few variations of project concepts to reduce storm surge impacts in Mandeville. This includes variations of the 2016 USAC and City of Mandeville Silver Jacket study and more recent project concepts provided by the City of Mandeville and city engineers. Alternatives include raising or replacing the existing seawall and providing additional improvements such as flood walls, flaps, and gates. This alternative will investigate full pump and passive drainage systems. This would address tidal and storm surge flooding. Some of the next steps as we continue the planning process are continued incorporation of feedback into the study process and alternative formulation. We will be conducting riverine and coastal modeling for all of the alternatives. We'll be doing a non-structural plan analysis. All of that information will feed into evaluation and comparison of the alternatives that we presented and any new alternatives that are incorporated. We will be developing cost estimates and then conducting economic modeling to support plan selection. Environmental, cultural, and recreational benefits and impact analysis will be conducted to feed into plan selection, and we'll continue to coordinate with the non-federal sponsor CPRA the parish government, and all other stakeholders as we move forward. And this will include continued coordination with the natural resource agencies. Next, you will hear from Everard Baker. He is the environmental manager for this project, and he will walk you through some of the other parts of our planning process.
I just want to take this time while they switch to say thank you for those submitting comments. We will get to them as soon as our presentation is done.
Good afternoon. My name is Everard Baker. I'm a biologist with the Regional Environmental Planning Division, and I'm the environmental manager for this project. I'm responsible for assessing the social or the human and natural impacts to the natural environment. So some of the environmental issues that we're looking at in the study area, the major ones include Gulf sturgeon, the West Indian manatee, red cockaded woodpecker, gopher tortoise habitat. There's visual resources over in the Mandeville lakefront, environmental justice communities and alternatives 4 and 5. We have recreation impacts in all of the alternatives that we're considering, and then also historic and cultural resources. There are HDRW concerns with some of the alternatives, and we will be addressing those as needed as we move forward into our selected plan. Views at the Mandeville lakefront are being considered, and impacts to the recreational value of Tammany Trace are being considered. We are working with our partners over at Fish and Wildlife for any impacts to the National Wildlife Refuge, and marsh creation has been considered for all of the alternatives as appropriate. Next slide. The National Environmental Policy Act was signed into law by President Nixon in January 1970. NEPA requires all federal agencies to consider the impacts to the natural environment and document our decision making as we move through our process. We provide a range of alternatives and opportunities for providing comment and input into our decision making process, and we have to document how we are engaging with you. So the point of this meeting is to reach out to the public, see if we can get some more input from you all, and use that to refine our alternatives. Our notice of intent was published in the Federal Register on June 19th of this year, and it is letting the public know that we will be preparing an environmental impact statement. As you can see on the screen, here is our calendar of what we've done so far with our environmental coordination. You can see we started this process back with our interagency meeting, had our pre-scoping public meetings back in the spring, and we've established our baseline conditions in coordination with our partners in March. And you can see we've moved forward to our current date on July 14th. With our initial public scoping meeting, we'll have another tomorrow. Next slide. So the input that we're looking for from the public: do the alternatives that we have presented to you today meet the needs of the community? Are there additional problems related to flooding in the project area that are not captured or are not addressed by the proposed alternatives? With what storm or rainfall event did your community see the most damages? How often are you seeing flooding? And are there measures or alternative strategies that would address the problems more effectively? You can see on your screen there are multiple ways to contact us in addition to the comments that you can submit on Facebook Live right now. There's our project email address, St. Tammany Feasibility Study, fs@usace.army.mil. Our project manager can be reached at the physical address listed on your screen, and you can text or leave a voicemail at the number listed. We also have a project website, and we'll be continuing to accept formal comments through August 3rd of this year.
We do ask that if you text or call in to the voicemail number that you identify the St. Tammany Parish Feasibility Study in your message so that we can make sure that we receive the message, not the other team members that may be using the phone number. We do see a lot of questions coming in. We're going to have just 1 second to change speakers, and we'll start answering them.
Thank you for joining us today. This concludes the formal presentation part. We're now going to move into the question and answer part of our video today. So I will turn things over to Amy Dixon.
Hi, everyone. We're going to start with Michelle Myers. One of the questions that we had come in was about the Lower Tchefuncte plans. As our plan formulator, she was instrumental in coordinating all of the data that we received, and she is instrumental in creating the screening chart or matrix that we use to screen out items. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle really quickly.
So the lower defuncta alternative, which was alternative 13 from our initial array, that was one of our nature-based alternatives. So that alternative created was shoreline creation and marsh creation, marsh restoration. And so through our screening process, we actually removed all of those nature-based features as standalone projects due to their effectiveness and efficiency of reducing coastal storm damages. So we looked into historic studies and literature searches, and were able to get a range of analysis from our engineers on the amount of storm surge reduction that could be expected from a marsh creation or shoreline restoration projects, and we were not seeing the benefits with those proposed projects. And so that is why alternative 13 was screened out.
Thanks, Michelle. If at any time our questions do not fully answer, or our answers do not fully answer your question, feel free to reach out to us through one of the means that we listed. We can give you a more thorough answer. All comments will be addressed when we do release our final draft of our report. One of the questions we've received quite a bit in the last few days through our email address is what can be done about development in my area. Our study, unfortunately, does not address how the parish regulates development of the land in your area. Our study is only authorized to look at flood risk reduction. So we are looking at the features that are currently present in the area where we see flooding right now. It's almost impossible to account for the flooding that we would see in the future based off of unknown development. So if you have concerns about development in your area, we would ask that you would contact your councilwoman or representative for the parish.
Okay. We had an additional question on who represents the city of Madisonville. We'll officially respond by saying there are various stakeholders that have been identified throughout and who have been coordinating with the parish, and so with us in the parish throughout the study. So we can go back and check to make sure that somebody from Madisonville is included in our stakeholder meetings. But officially, CPRA is our study sponsor, and CPRA is the single entity with authority to articulate the priorities of the parish and to focus development and implementation efforts for this study. And so we'll officially defer to CPRA on that one.
We've recently received a question as well regarding the land bridge, the surge barrier for Lake Pontchartrain. It was considered as an alternative initially. We did have our engineering team complete an answer for you guys, and I'm going to go ahead and read that now. The St. Tammany Feasibility Study considered a few options to reduce storm surge from entering Lake Pontchartrain. These storm surge reduction measures include gate structures at the main passes, including the Wrigley's and marsh creation and shoreline protection. The gate structures were screened from consideration based on effectiveness. The estimated cost to construct the gate barrier exceeded estimated damages avoided in St. Tammany Parish. It should be noted that under the authority for this evaluation, we are limited to avoiding damages in St. Tammany Parish for justification of the project. So what that means is benefits can only be measured and weighed for this project that benefit just St. Tammany Parish. So additional benefits from avoided damages may be included to enhance the project viability, but project justification must be based on benefits in the primary study area. Previous studies have considered benefits to multiple parishes and areas throughout the Pontchartrain Basin. It should also be noted that potential mitigation costs for environmental and induced flooding impacts to the area outside the barrier including in the state of Mississippi, have not yet been incorporated into the cost estimate. The marsh creation and shoreline protections features of the barrier alternative were also screened due to the relatively low efficiency with which they would be able to reduce storm surge impacts. Under the authority for this effort, environmental features must be justified on their ability to reduce economic damages. Prior studies and research have been conducted to determine the degree to which water levels would be expected to be reduced in St. Tammany Parish, based on the potential acreage of marsh creation and shoreline protection possible in the area. These analyses showed that the expected costs outweighed the storm surge reduction benefits. Additionally, the marsh creation feature was expected to have high O&M or operations cost in order to maintain the marsh at the certain elevation over time and ensure the expected reduction of surge. To summarize that engineering answer, the cost for the projects was very high compared to the reduction in damages for St. Tammany Parish alone. If you have further questions on that alternative, we will get them for you.
So that concludes our question and answer period. For now, we will stay in the room to monitor and answer questions as we can for the next a little while. So please, if you have any questions or comments, please leave us a comment here. We'll capture everything for the official report as we would if we were in person. So I'm going to put up the contact slide back up, and we'll leave it up for a little while if you want to write that down, or you know, the address, the email address, the phone number, or the project website. So thank you very much for joining us today. We will be doing this again tomorrow at 6 p.m. On our Facebook page. So thank you very much. Leave us a comment if you have any.